are aware that, the Republican on their ballot is not the same old Republican they've been voting for 40 years, that this is a different guy, that, now is not the time to sort of take a chance on somebody who is just running in the shadow of their father and, with their father's name, that we can do better by the people of the 12th District.
Well, and it looks like a lot of the people we're talking to in your area of Pennsylvania, that you actually got more votes in the primary than your opponent did. You were both running unopposed.
That's right. It was a really exciting day for me. I felt really energized going from polling place to polling place and meeting voters, Democrat and Republican alike. And I met a lot of Republican voters on primary day who said, I can't vote for you today, but I'll consider voting for you in November because it's time for a change. And at the end of the night, when the results rolled in and we saw that we had gotten more votes than our, the Republican rival, I was overjoyed. I was so excited to see the energy of voters, to see Democratic voters really stepping up, getting to the polls. It's a hard thing to get people to vote in local primaries, as you know, I'm sure. And it was really exciting to see that energy. And we had a really terrible rainstorm at about 3:30, 4 o'clock. The polls were open till 8. And we had a deluge. It was just an unbelievable downpour. They had tornado warnings in part of the district. And it was a really scary turn of events with regard to the weather. And I was just so excited to see people still streaming into the polling places and shaking my hand and saying, I got here to vote. I made it in just under the rain, or I'm going to wait it out. And when the rain finishes, I'll run to my car. But it was really exciting. And we were, it was so fun to be at the last polling place of the evening and seeing the polls close at 8 o'clock and going outside to take a picture under a rainbow that came out after the storm. And it just felt like a real moment of triumph for us, a feeling of, wow, people were really excited to be here and excited to be here despite impediments to getting out to vote. So it was a really great day.
That's excellent. So let's talk a little bit about your professional background. You have kind of an interesting background that you've worked both as an attorney and a nurse. So can you talk a little bit about those pieces of your professional background and how that work you've done translates into the kind of things you'd like to see in the state Senate?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I started my career as an attorney, and I worked for the Attorney General's office in New Jersey. I represented the state in child abuse and neglect cases. So when a child was removed from an abusive or neglectful home, I represented the state in placement of that child and getting services to the family so that we could reunite. Reunification was always our goal with those children, to make sure that we had a safe and healthy environment for those children to go to. And that was really a goal of mine when I got out of law school. I wanted to work in an environment where I was going to be helping families and children especially. That was a real area of interest for me. And the switch for me, I decided at some point while I was practicing law to go back to school and become a nurse. And a lot of people hear that and think, well, that is like, just a complete sort of, 180, like you just went in the complete opposite direction. But for me, it really was a very natural progression. I knew I wanted to advocate, and I knew I wanted to make an impact on people's lives in a very direct and profound way. And I started researching helping professions. I knew I wanted to go into a helping profession, and I started doing research. And overwhelmingly, the nurses with whom I interacted were positive, excited, encouraging about their career choice. They said, it's a great field to go into. There's so much diversity and choice with regard to the area that you can practice. And at the end of the day, you really can make a difference in people's lives. And so I pursued nursing school, and I worked at a law firm during the day and went to school at night to get my prerequisites to go to an accelerated nursing program at Drexel here in Philadelphia, and earned my bachelor's in nursing in 11 months, which was really tough but wonderful. It was a really great experience to to sort of do it in that way, because it really immersed me in nursing and understanding what the call to nursing was. And for me, being at the bedside I never second guessed it. Once I got at the bedside and I started working with people I worked in the fields of pediatric home health and trauma and long-term care. And once I started working with people and seeing the incredible impact that I could have on their quality of life, their well-being, it really made me feel like I had chosen a profession that wasn't just a good profession. For me, it was choosing something that was really at the top of the food chain in the sense of helping, and that's what I had always wanted to do. It's why I had gone to law school in the first place. I knew I wanted to be a helper. We hear that quote, that famous quote from Mr. Rogers, where he says, during times of tragedy, always look for the helpers. And I knew I always wanted to be a helper. I just couldn't figure out how. I couldn't figure out where until I found nursing. And for me, it translated so quickly because it was about advocacy. It was about listening. It was about finding a way to understand what people needed and get them to the place where they were going to be functioning, at the highest level that they could. And for me, that translates to a position as a legislator because it's about listening and working toward getting people's needs met. I like to say that when I was a lawyer, I talked a lot, and when I became a nurse, I learned to listen a lot, and that's really true. I learned to listen and find out what people needed. I found that people can tell you what it is they need, or at the very least, they can tell you what they'd like to get back to, what part of their life is the part that they want to, get back to. And if you can listen with an open heart and open mind and compassion, then you can work toward finding that resolution, that solution for them. And for me, that's what legislating is about. It's about listening to the needs of the community, taking those needs to Harrisburg or the legislature and fighting for those needs, fighting to meet those needs to the best of our ability within our, capabilities, and minding a budget and making sure that we're doing everything in a responsible way, but meeting the needs of the people as they have voiced them.
And you're a mom too, right?
That's right. Yes.
As you were talking, I was thinking too, that's exactly the same skill that I use as a mom, is trying to figure out.
Absolutely.
Especially if a kid is like freaking out, and is trying to say, okay, what is it that they really need, and trying to get them to express that to me. Have you found that you're using sort of mom skills, or you're using nursing skills to be a mom, or vice versa?
I think you're right. I think it's absolutely, part and parcel, definitely. I think that it is, when you have the role of mom and you sort of see yourself in that role and you think of yourself in that way, you're right. That is the ultimate helping profession. It is trying to help navigate this child who doesn't have any skill or coping mechanism or, any ability to communicate. You're navigating them into the world, into adulthood, into, hopefully positive action and positive interaction with other people. And you're right. It is the same skill. It is listening and trying to get to what is it you need? How can I help you get there? And I find myself saying that. I have a 6-year-old, and I find myself saying that a lot to him. How can I help you get there? What is it you need? What can I do to get you to the place you want to be? And, it is. It's a valuable skill to learn to ask that question. And I think it's a good skill for him to be able to figure out how to put that into words, to say, what is it that I need and how can mom help? That's important.
You're running for state senate, so I don't want to get bogged down with a discussion of all of the things that are going on in the national news now. But I think given the kinds of professional experiences you have, it's worth sort of thinking about this idea of, we're talking about this idea of government as being able to help people get to where they're trying to get. And it feels very much right now like the national discourse in government is sort of how to prevent people from getting what's going to be helpful to them. And of course, I'm oversimplifying, but I'm wondering what ways you can see sort of the role of a state legislator being important in this political discourse right now, in this environment where people feel very unsafe and they feel very unwelcome in the country that they've called home. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts on sort of the role of the state in that discussion.
I absolutely do. And I think you're right. It's hard to think of one without thinking of the other. And when we talk about what's happening at the national level, in order to understand what's happening at the state level, we have to be able to see that what's happening at the national level affects us profoundly here, state by state, community by community. And the way I was at a meeting last night speaking to some Democrats and, active people that are involved in their community politics. And I was talking with them and saying, first of all, that I was happy to be there in a place where I could talk about the things that are really important to us and be, among like-minded people. But to also say to them, hope is not lost, that at the state level, there are so many things that we can do to empower the citizens of our state, regardless of what's happening at the national level. I think one of the things that happens is often we are waiting for them to sort of figure things out nationally, get Washington straightened out. Once Washington is straightened out, everything will be okay. And people are really starting to take a step back, at least in my experience in talking with voters, people are really starting to take a step back and realize that, in fact, if we can get ourselves on a good path toward, like you were saying, good government has a place in people's lives. If we can get ourselves on that path, then we can start to fix the problems that impact our communities, at the most basic level without being, so sort of worried about not being able to stop a runaway train in Washington. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that we're doing that, and this is what I talked about last night, was making sure that we are electing people to our state legislature that have the same ideals and really are willing to stand up and fight for those ideals. And that really has a lot to do with sort of looking around at the people that have been holding office, holding them accountable for the votes they've made while in office, because it's a big part of it, too, that a lot of times our state legislators come back to their home districts and label themselves as something other than, a conservative. But then they go up to Harrisburg and they vote alongside their conservative colleagues a majority of the time. And so their voting record isn't supporting what it is they're telling us in the community. And really holding our elected officials to their voting records, holding them accountable for the promises that they're making, and asking questions and saying, this is my opportunity to ask you where you stand on, whatever the issue is and what you're going to do about it once you get to Harrisburg, because I'm willing to support you, and I'm hearing this from people. I'm willing to support you, but I want to know that the things you're telling me today are the things you're going to do tomorrow when you get to Harrisburg, and really holding people accountable, to a level of integrity. And having been a lawyer and a nurse, I have learned that operating with integrity is absolutely paramount. People want to interact with someone who is genuine, who is accountable, who is transparent, and who is operating with integrity. And that's what they want in their legislators, too. I think so many people can get, sort of disenchanted and say, oh, all politicians are the same. But what they're really saying is, I want somebody who can listen to me. I want somebody who I can trust to go to my state capitol and speak on my behalf for the things that I've told them are important to me. And that's what I've tried to tell people when I knock on doors, when I go to meetings, when I'm at a meet and greet, or when I'm out in the neighborhood at an event and I'm shaking hands with people at a community event, at a festival. I'm trying to remind them, hey, these things I did as a lawyer and as a nurse, they taught me how to act with integrity, and I'm not going to drop that just because I become your representative and your legislator. You can trust me to do the things that I say I'm going to do. And that's really important to people.
One of the issues that I know is important in Pennsylvania, it's important all over the country, is the opioid crisis. And so as a nurse, as a healthcare professional, what are the kinds of ideas you have for what a state legislature should or could be doing to address that crisis?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. And we're seeing